This is Support is Sexy, episode 588, with Tiffany Crenshaw, CEO of Intellect Resources. Welcome to Support is Sexy. I'm your host, Elaine Fluker, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I bring you inspiring women entrepreneurs who share their wins and lessons to help you take your business to the next level. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. I'm so happy to have you here. You know, it just would not be the same without you. Now, today I am super excited to talk to someone, Tiffany Crenshaw, who talks about how she had to level up her mindset and make sure that she had support as she grew her business, Intellect Resources, which is a staffing and recruiting company exclusively for the healthcare industry. And what I love in this episode, Tiffany talks about the importance of creating space to learn how to try and fail and try again, but also, again, how she learned how to get support for her dreams and what she wanted to create in her business. But then something that we don't think about, how to get support during the time when your business is really successful. So she experienced this rapid growth after the recent recession, and she said she wasn't mentally prepared for that or prepared to just how fast her business was going to grow as far as needing a team. And then getting some of the accolades after that, her business not only grew, it was very successful. Also, how do you get support when you're the one that's on top or near the top and it's just different? You're playing in a different field and you might not have the same people around you that you used to, or the people around you might not understand what you're going through. So we talk about all that in this episode, and I'm so grateful to Tiffany for sharing not only how you grow a multi-million-dollar business, but also mentally and the mindset and things that you need to be aware of as you grow a multi-million-dollar business. So I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, Tiffany Crenshaw. So Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us for an episode of Support is Sexy. I'm excited to chat with you.
Likewise.
So our first question for you, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
Oh, I think that goes back to just being naturally an entrepreneur. As a young girl in the neighborhood, I was the kid that was always organizing the plays and the shows where we charged for attendance. One time my mom actually gave up her home and we brought all the neighborhood kids in and we ran a little restaurant for the evening for the neighbors. And of course we charged, it was 50 cents a meal. But hey, I think it goes back to there. And by the time I was 12, I was running quite a babysitting business. My dad was taking calls from moms calling in, wanting to book my services. So as long as I can remember.
What do you think it was about you that made you love running your own business?
I think I just like to build things. I like to set things up. I was that kid that would play with a dollhouse long enough to set it up, and then I was off to something big. So I think it's just that natural love of building and crafting things.
Mm-hmm. Now, you grew up in North Carolina, right? I know that's where you are now. Is that where you grew up?
I did. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, when it was much smaller than it is today.
Yes, it's bustling now.
Yes.
How would you describe yourself? Obviously, you were a builder. You like to build things. But overall, how would you describe yourself as a young person growing up in Charlotte?
I would say a creative kid. I really enjoyed arts and crafts. I love to read. I love to write, like to do poetry. Always just a creative thinker, a very independent kid. And yes, I would say I could be described as a child as bossy, but we know that today as being a leadership skill.
Exactly, especially for girls. They used to always try to tell us we're bossy, right? You need to be quiet. Right. Don't be so bossy. Yeah. Now you're a boss.
Exactly. There we go.
Do you have siblings?
I do. And my brother and I, we love to talk about how just very fortunate we were to grow up. We had very young parents that had a lot of energy for being parents. Both of them didn't particularly love the way that they were raised. So they really were they had an intent and a plan for the way that they wanted to parent. So my brother and I really, really benefited from that. They were great parents, taught us to be independent, taught us how to fail, taught us how to pick up and, make do with what we have and make the best of things. They were great parents.
What would you say the greatest lesson is that you might have learned from your parents about how to fail? And then, as you said, how to pick up and keep going.
So my mom's favorite expression to us when we would leave, for the day or we'd hang up the phone, instead of saying, have a great day, she always said, make it a great day. So, for us, it was, make the best of what you have and go out there and make great things happen. They would let us struggle a little bit in school, maybe, slip in our grades a little bit so we could see what that would feel. And then they would swoop in kind of with a plan and say, this is not acceptable. These are the things that are going away because your grades are down. And these are the rewards that we're putting in place for you to improve them. I mean, that's just kind of the way they handled parenting. They'd let us slip a little bit, feel the consequences, but they kind of swoop in and show us and reward us in some ways for fixing those. I think they did a great job. And by the way, both my brother and I were really, really good students as a result of that.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I hear now, I don't have children, but I hear now parents, whether friends of mine or others, talk about that a lot of parents don't give their kids that space. It sounds like your parents gave you the space. Like you said, you slip a little, you feel the consequences, and then they come in as adults just to tell you, okay, this is what we're going to do to change it. Or I'm sure maybe sometimes let you figure things out. But now a lot of parents don't. I shouldn't say a lot. Some I've heard discussed don't really allow their kids to just have that space to lose a race or, figure out how to do better in school or just have the experience of failing or slipping and knowing that you can come back.
You are so right about that. And I also think our system is set up that way. I mean, they want the schools, they give parents the tools to be able to see their kids' grades online, and they really encourage those parents to helicopter and be there. And it is hard as a parent when everybody else is kind of stepping in and helicoptering to step back. I always have to remind myself to say, that's not what my parents did. But it is a struggle as a parent today because that's just kind of what is expected. And it's the struggle.
What would you say that your aspirations were for when you got older?
Honestly, I wanted to do something like you did. I mean, I really had these dreams as a young girl, kind of coming up through school. I loved newspaper. I loved yearbook. I loved to write. Loved to goof around with short stories and poetry. And so I always had these visions of being up on Madison Avenue, working in the big ad agencies in New York. And life just kind of happened in a different way, and I'm really glad that it did. But as a young girl, imagining what I wanted to be up in Madison Avenue, up in New York, with high heels with a briefcase and in and out of advertising agencies. That's what I really wanted to do.
What did the journey, or where did the journey take you instead?
Well, I did start my career. I went to journalism school at Chapel Hill, and then I moved to Greensboro because I did fall in love with my husband, and it just seemed like, a great place for us to get started in our journey together. And I worked in advertising for quite a bit and realized me being a workaholic and what's required in that industry. And quite honestly, I wasn't that talented at that. I ended up, falling into the recruitment business. It took a couple, journeys to get there, a couple stops and jobs to get there. But I started recruiting and absolutely found my craft and my passion. And I realized what I really loved to do was connect people, and like you, to hear their stories and hear what the client stories are, and put it all together and make those matches.
When you started recruiting, were you doing that for another company, or this is when you started your own business?
I was trying to get out of the advertising space and had gone into sales. So I was selling paper products into hospitals, anything that was printed into hospitals, and I was bored out of my mind. And I interviewed with a recruiting firm, thinking they were going to place me someplace with one of their clients, and maybe that was the intent when I came in. But they had me take a personality test, and it was dead on the right personality for recruiting. So I went to go work as a technical IT recruiter for them, and that's where I fell in love with the craft, but didn't particularly love the company that I worked for. And I know now, looking back, I'm just not I'm not employable as an employee. I'm a manager, a boss, a leader, but I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm certainly not an employee. And then had an opportunity to go work in a small healthcare IT consulting company to build out their recruiting arm. And that's kind of where my business launched.
So tell us about the moment that you decided to take that leap into entrepreneurship. Like you said, you realized that, okay, I'm a boss, a leader. I want to create my own thing. What was that transition like for you?
Well, I have to talk about, to kind of tell that story, is talk about going to go work for this small healthcare IT consulting company, because that was
Mm-hmm.
really a turning point in my career. I think I kind of indicated I had bounced a little bit in jobs right out of school, kind of looking for that ideal, so to speak. And I landed with this small healthcare IT consulting company, and the owner of the company, my mother actually did his corporate benefits and personal finance. And he was telling my mom, he said, I am poised to grow this company, but I am really stymied by the fact I can't get good talent. And my mom looked at him and said, you know what? My daughter's a technical recruiter, and she used to sell things into hospitals. So she knows hospitals and she knows IT. She knows how to recruit. And my mom made that introduction that just really changed my life. So he by far was an amazing entrepreneur, an amazing leader, and a great mentor. So I joined him, and kind of in the beginning of our dialogue together, it went something like this, hey, Bill, where are your resumes? I don't have any. What's your recruiting process? I don't have any. What's your applicant tracking system? I don't have any. And I said, well, great, you've, brought in the right person, because I love to build these things. So we built his whole recruiting arm, his recruiting processes, got his technology in, and helped him grow from a 20-person company to a 100-person company. Ultimately, he merged that company and sold it to IBM, and did very well in his journey. But long about the time he was looking to merge his company and we were celebrating the 100th hire, we kind of had a very frank conversation. And he said, basically, you've helped me make a lot of money and you get bored really easily. So what are we going to do? And within a few days, I put the business plan for our company, Intellect Resources, on the table. And I said, we're going to take what we've built, what I've built for you, and we're going to roll this into a separate company. And we're going to offer our recruiting services to your clients who might need full-time resources. And that's what we should do. So he funded it. I did the sweat equity, and we, did this together for a year or so. And then I bought him out, and we just yesterday was our 20th anniversary.
Wow, Tiffany, that's an amazing story. And I love that your mom was involved in the beginning too, just because of what you told us about her and this creating the space for you guys. But I just love that the initiative and the fact that when he said, what are we going to do too, for everyone to catch who's listening, that you came up with a plan, even if maybe you didn't know, or maybe you did. You sound very poised and clear on what you wanted to do. But for other people, maybe in that moment, you might not know exactly how it's going to work out or anything like that. But the opportunity and the space was there for you to present something as an idea for what it could become. And now, as you said, it's 20 years later.
Absolutely. And I think you said something really key there is opportunity. And I think that's kind of the story that so many entrepreneurs have, is that, it's what you do with that opportunity. I think we're all given those opportunities over and over again, and it's just recognizing them and doing something with them.
Mm-hmm. And also enrolling other people in your vision. I'm very big on that, of course, talking about support overall, because even though you'd worked with this gentleman for years, still you had to enroll him in your vision for, okay, this is what we're going to do. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Was it just the business plan, or did you have to do anything more?
It was, I had never written a business plan, but I can remember, in fact, I probably still have it, but it was, about a 10-page document with my journalism, who, what, why, when, where in there, as well as some spreadsheets with, some numbers and performance. And I don't know how I came up with the format. I just spit it all out on paper, dressed it up real pretty, because I came from that marketing advertising. And I just remember going over that with him, and him nodding his head, looking at those numbers, going, I think those numbers are a little aggressive. And he was right. It took about, 4 to 5 years to hit those numbers. But we did it. And it was just a great conversation. He was so receptive, so warm. And, by the end of my presentation to him, he said, okay, let's do it. How much money do we need to get started? And we did this thing on a shoestring budget. It was great.
That's awesome. And I love, thank you for mentioning that to us, that you didn't know how to do a business plan at that time. You kind of, I'm sure, had a sense and idea, but like you said, you pulled it together. It's 10 pages. You put the information in there. Maybe it wasn't exactly right, but not having the fear of, oh, I don't know how to do a business plan. And then who knows where you would have been if you hadn't taken that step. So excellent. So what was it like then when you decided to, or were at the point where you wanted to buy him out of the business? What's that process like for anyone who might be either there with the partner or investor or otherwise?
In my, I'm in a women's business group where I get together with other women entrepreneurs. And, a lot of them have kind of told stories where they've really struggled with those moments of separating from a partner or doing a buyout.
Mm-hmm.
I remember nothing of that because if you remember, he was, working to merge his company with another one and then was, with the end game of selling out and obviously sold out to IBM. I think it was just so easy. Just the conversation came up. I think he was ready to move onward. I was ready to take this, and it was just so easy. I mean, it was probably a 10-15 minute conversation, and before we know it, we were sitting signing paperwork in front of attorneys, and I was basically writing him a check for the investment that he had put back into the company to get it started.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any fears or anything at all in you about, okay, I'm taking on this company, I'm doing this on my own in those early moments?
No, because I think I was young, dumb, and
The benefits
fearless at that point. Ignorance is bliss. No qualms at all. It just all felt right in the gut. And I have done so much in my life by just following that gut instinct and trying to kind of turn the chatter off in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And the worry that, you might get in your heart, and just kind of follow that gut. So no fears. Maybe I should have, but no fears.
You definitely shouldn't have. It all worked out, Tiffany. It all worked out. How was it to then working with clients after that transition? I mean, you had been at the company all that time, so I assume, was it an easy transition for you to take over, or did any clients sort of say, oh, I'm not sure?
No, because he really was not very involved. I mean, I think he really just did the seed money. And then because we had spawned out of his consulting company that had such a good name, and, it was his practice directors of the consulting companies that were feeding us the referral business, that I was really just known as Intellect Resources. So, the clients didn't really, once they got in the door, it didn't. Yeah, it was easy.
Excellent. So tell us about Intellect Resources and how you support your clients.
Okay, so what we are is we're a niche specialty recruiting and consulting company. And I use those terms because that's what most people understand kind of on the surface. But basically what it boils down to is we work in the healthcare IT market, and we help find the resources that will install, support, optimize, maintain the software systems that are unique to hospitals. I'm sure you've probably been in or around a hospital lately or in a physician practice, and you see everybody on the computer screens and the doctors and nurses are taking notes. We install those systems and support them, optimize them, and all of that jazz. And so when I say we, sometimes we help hospitals. We help them find the resources that they hire, and sometimes I hire them to my team and loan them out into the field as consultants, that they come in and, we'll work a project maybe for 3 weeks or for 2 years or whatever that might be. So the end game is, our people are on the ground working with those systems, but our real talent is finding the talent to go do that.
So you work with healthcare professionals, people who are, but from the technology side.
That is correct. And many of the folks that we place were doctors or nurses or pharmacists or other either clinical or operational areas in hospitals that just kind of, moved on over into the IT, where they were able to leverage their operational understanding of how hospitals work into the IT space. So over 50% of my candidates and consultants we work with are clinicians that turn to the IT side.
Mm-hmm. When I was reading about your company, I thought about the dentist that I was going to went to in Atlanta. And the last time I went before I started traveling, they had just installed some system that required patients to fill out their information via iPad, but you can tell they were still getting used to it. But there was a woman there who was sort of helping them whenever they had any problems. And I thought, I wonder if that's what Intellect Resources does.
That's actually what we do right at the
Okay.
end of an implementation. So,
Okay.
we may help select the software. We may project manage the software going in. We may do the technical install, but at the very end, that's called go live support, where you have an activation consultant that goes out into the hospital or to the physician practices that help those clinicians or the folks at the registration desk or the folks at the billing within their first couple days or first couple weeks of using those. Because, you have patients at risk there. And if they are, the system's going down, or if they are not comfortable users within the system, they need immediate help. And so
Right.
that's called activation support. It's kind of like a help desk right there at their shoulders to help them for a period of time. So we do that. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Like you said, now it's been 20 years in your business. How have you seen, I know this is a very broad question, but how have you seen and how have you been able to sort of manage industry changes?
So that's a really good question. I will tell you, the technology changes so rapidly. I mean, in the early days, we were putting in the mainframe programmers, that were programming these systems, and then today it's the folks that are going in and, hooking up and connecting these wireless devices and the tablets or devices that, patients are wearing home. And connecting to the internet to pass their vital signs or what have you back. So for me, one of the biggest challenges is keeping up with the technology and always making sure that I am in touch with the talent that is trained on that technology. And so we certainly have morphed multiple times through the years where, okay, old days were, mainframe programmers, new days are, tablets and device and security folks in there. So it's just keeping up with the technology and the relationships around that technology.
Right. And for a company that's been in business for so long, do you also help the different people who work with you get the training that they need, or do you just start looking for people with different kinds of skills or a combination?
So now you're kind of touching on my heart, and one of kind of the pinnacles of my personal career is we've actually done a lot of workforce development in our day, and I'll take you back to 2008, right as the recession was hitting. Very fortunately for intellect resources and for our industry, is the government had passed some legislation mandating that every hospital and every physician practice in the United States install an electronic health record. Lucky for us, that's what we did. And we were really able to ride this huge wave as everybody in our industry was scrambling to put these systems in. But what happened is there was a tremendous talent shortage during this time. And so over a period of several years, we ended up helping 4 different clients develop local teams. So we leveraged our recruiting ability to, market to candidates, to screen candidates, to find folks with good attitudes and aptitudes. And we would go into these markets for our hospital clients, and we would host these big hiring events. Kind of think about American Idol,
Right.
Meet Apprentice. We called them these big break events. So we leveraged our ability to put together these events and our ability to recruit good talent to these events. Then we screened folks with our clients, and then we selected kind of the best of the best in those events. And then we trained them in these electronic health records. And in some cases, the client did the training. In some cases, it was a partnership between us and the client. And in some cases, we did the full training. But, over a course of several years, we, recruited and trained and then kind of monitored folks during their first kind of what I would call internship or their first engagement, so that we could kind of coach and monitor their performance. Well over 500 people into our industry.
Wow.
And to me, that was one of the most rewarding experiences, because the clients were able to develop a local talent base to fill industry shortage of resources. And it was an economical way, because they were bringing kind of new folks up, training them in skills, so that it was an economical option. But then to see those 500 or so, we call them fondly our big breakers, to see those folks grow in their careers. And now I can see, who's risen up into, project managers or director level positions. And I can say, hey, we found them when, they were working in retail and they wanted to make a change, or they were a school teacher and they wanted to make a change, or they were a nurse and they wanted to make a change. And we were the catalyst to help them find this career and launch all these careers. So that's my pinnacle. We have really, really love that piece.
And you've, not only have you helped them change careers, I'm sure for a lot of people, you changed their lives. You supported their families or helped them be able to support their families in a different way. It's such a huge example of how you can have an impact during a time when, that goes beyond just your everyday or day-to-day business.
Exactly. And for me, one of the more meaningful ones is we did one in New Orleans right after Katrina. Mm-hmm. And there were 225 folks that we, recruited through a big break event. We trained them in Epic, which is one of the big EHRs. And then most of them stayed with us for over a year on a big engagement. But I didn't realize till after the fact, and I have gotten so many kind emails or notes or LinkedIn messages or phone calls to say just that. Hey, we were devastated when Katrina happened, and little did you know, this is what this did for me and my family. And I didn't really realize it then, but I get little nuggets of that, as I run into these folks or get the phone calls or emails, and that's very rewarding.
Yes, that's amazing. Now, as you mentioned, it was just after the recession that this happened, and you created the big break and things for these different clients. And I also read that was during the time that your company grew very fast or got a lot of great attention with hitting the Inc. 500 list at number 39. Is that right?
That is correct.
And winning the 4th fastest growing woman-owned business in North America. The 4th fastest growing woman-owned business in North America, and many other things that happened during that time. But which first of all, congratulations. That's amazing. So impact and accolades. We love that. But one of the things I saw that was so intriguing is you mentioned that you don't feel like you were prepared for that moment, that big sort of, I don't know if it was the attention or the fast growth or what it was, but tell us why that moment of, having this great impact, getting all these accolades was sort of a tough transition for you.
Well, I want to tell you just a story, just really quickly. When I knew that everything was changing, I had been up in New York City with a client, and I had pitched the idea of this first big break. Actually, the client had sort of come up with the idea, and they called and said, hey, can you execute this? And I'd put together a quick proposal and a vision on how to execute it. And I'd given my pitch, and, she didn't even ask the price. She said, okay, let's do it. And then we flipped over the price, and she signed the paperwork. And I went back out onto it was actually Madison Avenue in New York, and I'm standing out in the street, taking a deep breath, and I just knew this was the changing point. And I'm standing in there, and it's wintertime, and all of a sudden it starts to snow. And you asked me earlier what my vision was as a young girl, as I had wanted to be up in New York, up in Madison Avenue with my heels and my briefcase. And I knew that this was a turning point, and I'm standing in there in New York City, and it starts to snow. What a moment. But that was that kind of game-changing moment when I went, oh my gosh, here we go. And for the next several years, it was just a tremendous rise. In fact, we hit that Inc. 500 list the year before at like number 700 something. And I was kind of, laughing with my team. I said, hey, next year we're going to get into the 500. Mm-hmm. And when the numbers came in and we ended up at 39, we were just off the charts, very, very happy. So it happened very quickly. What I wasn't prepared for at that time is when you are racing that fast, race, all you have in your mind is delivering what you've sold and delivering it well, keeping your ethics, making your employees happy. You're just so focused on delivery. What I wasn't prepared for is, when you're in that delivery mode and you're in that zone, is looking ahead. you don't even have the bandwidth. You're working on 4 and 5 hours of sleep a night, right? To start thinking about, well, what's going to happen when? What's going to happen when all these hospitals are live, with their EHRs? What's going to happen before kind of the next big change or till we pivot? That's what I was not prepared for. And if there was any message that I could give to any entrepreneur is when you're in that zone and in that growth mode, in that moment, always make sure you have time to plan ahead. Because what's going to happen in that growth moment is sometimes you outgrow your staff that you had. All of a sudden, you need, bigger gunpowder, bigger bandwidth. How are you going to handle that? Your systems are going to start crumble because at some point, a small, $3 million company's, systems aren't going to necessarily handle the volume when you creep up, much higher in volume. And then how are you building that pipeline to sell additional business or look for what that next big thing is? So, pause when you're in that zone in that moment and always say, well, what's going to happen when this is over? That's what I was not prepared for.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's such great advice. And would you say, first I'll ask this, would you say that it's when you feel that change, sort of as you did on Madison Avenue, which is such a beautiful visual of you, especially like a full circle moment, but would you say that when you have that moment where even you feel like, okay, things are going to change and it could potentially go fast or rapidly, is that the time to have the sort of moments of planning? What is this going to look like after? Or can you only do that once you're sort of in the midst of the change and see what it's like? What would you say for you would have been, looking back, could have been either a better time or the best time?
Oh, that's a tough question. I would say first take a moment and enjoy the run for a moment, because you work so hard to get there. Enjoy the ride, enjoy the moment, enjoy any of the awards or the accolades that you get. I'd give yourself a little bit of time, whether it's, a couple weeks or a couple months. But I would say just once you start getting into that zone, carve out time every week to get away from your business. What's that old adage is, you need to work on your business and not in your business.
That's right.
Make it a priority to get out of your business and work on it. And when you're in that, high, momentum zone, it is so hard to pull yourself out. But, make it every Friday afternoon, get out of the office, go for a walk or a hike or a drive or something to get yourself away and make yourself start just thinking about what's going to happen when and what do I need to start preparing for and looking ahead. I didn't start doing it until later in the game. And I really wish that I had started after taking a moment to celebrate and enjoy. I wish I had started much earlier.
Such great, all of it is great advice. But I love one that you said, take a moment to enjoy, because even myself, sometimes guilty of that. You're already thinking about what's next as opposed to, well, this is a great moment. Let me enjoy this moment. But then also thinking about they're acknowledging that people are usually afraid to, like you said, take that time off or away from the business when things are going so fast and rapidly. But as you said, if it's a walk, a hike, or just a moment away, it's time at a cafe or an afternoon, or just some way to create the space, mentioning that just so people don't feel like, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to take, a week-long vacation while that's not really what you're saying. You're saying, again, going back to the beginning, create space to be able to do that. Am I hearing that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right.
What would you say, or would you say that during that time you also experienced some level of, I think I read about this, loneliness or isolation, just because either things were moving so fast or then you were experiencing all this success and maybe you didn't have as many peers as you did when you were, like as you mentioned, a $1 to $3 million company, and then all of a sudden you're in a whole different arena.
Right. Oh, it's hard sometimes to put in words as a feeling, or to use words to describe a feeling. But I would say it's more when you're going through that, you kind of find yourself a little bit on an island of kind of not knowing necessarily who to trust to go right? To go to for information or for advice. There comes a point that, there's some things that you need from a strategy or a thought that you can't always go to your employees, even your leadership team. I brought in outside consultants to help, but at the end of the day, you're paying those consultants, right? And those consultants, oftentimes, I feel like, are going to tell you what you want to hear. You also have just a ton of people calling on you. They're wanting to invest in your business. They're wanting to buy your business. They're going to want to, take your business out to market to sell. Bankers are going to want your business, and everybody's kind of all over, asking questions. And you kind of get to a point where you don't know who you can trust in there. My family is great. My mother is an entrepreneur. My dad started a not-for-profit. My husband owns his own business. My in-laws do. So I have all these entrepreneurs around me, but you go to them for advice, but they're jaded because I'm their, daughter or wife. And, and in their eyes, in some ways, we can't do any wrong. And so you're not always sure you're getting the right advice there. So I kind of feel like you could end up kind of on an island, right? And, maybe you want to confide or ask a friend, but they don't understand the business. So it's a lot of work to kind of explain, what you're struggling with. So I think there is this little, you find your place a little bit on an island, and it's a little bit lonely. And I think it's more is because you don't necessarily know where you can go and have just real trust that you're getting the right information or the right advice in there. Hopefully I described that well. It's hard to describe a feeling. It really is.
I understand. I totally, and it's interesting to hear, because a lot of the women, and a few good men, I always say, who listen to my podcast are in earlier stages. So they're either, launching or growing, or maybe even pivoting. They've had a career and now they're starting a business, doing something else. And there's feelings of isolation during that time, especially if you're doing something different than what you've always done. You have this great career and then all of a sudden you want to start a business or whatever it is. Then there's loneliness then, but then I think to hear from you, there's also, feelings of loneliness or isolation, or as you said, not necessarily knowing who you can trust for advice when you reach another level. So I think you explained it perfectly, and people will be able to relate to the feeling, just knowing that it's at a different stage. And I think it's something that I try to talk about, especially more on the podcast, of these emotions that go into entrepreneurship as well.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So what has been we're all about this around here, Tiffany, what has been the best support for you during that time and since that time?
So one of the things I think, I've said this before, and then it's certainly your philosophy, is I love to connect people. So for multiple times throughout my career, until I found WPO, the Women's Presidents Organization, I would assemble different women that I knew that owned businesses and would say, hey guys, let's go on a mountain retreat this weekend, or, let's all go out to dinner and let's kind of talk work. And it was very unstructured, but it was great, because you could, maybe not everything, but you could kind of, in that kind of safety zone, you could say, hey guys, I'm struggling a little bit about this. What do you think? And, you might have perspectives of people from different businesses. This one owned a babysitter, a nanny service, and this one is a, HR consultant. And, this one owns a video production company, that they would give. It's just very unstructured. And we had these great conversations. It was a great support group. And then several years later, actually, after I kind of got on the list with these awards, one of our local chapter leaders of WPO reached out to me. And that's been phenomenal. It's Women's Presidents Organization, and it's a big international organization. And I'm in a local chapter. And we do meet once a month. We have a professional facilitator, which was kind of different than what I had been doing on my own, kind of just pulling together girls I knew to say, let's go, to the mountains, or let's go out to dinner, or whatever. This is very structured. And that's been a great support network. And there's some things that I'm very comfortable going in there in sharing and getting their advice. And sometimes it's just nice just to go have a glass of wine, because they get it. They get it at the end of the day while we are exhausted, or, at the end of the day while we feel like we're, stretched in a gajillion different ways. And then, as I had mentioned, outside of looking for that women's support group, I do have that strong safety net within my family. My father, as I mentioned, started a not for profit and ran it for years before he retired. And my mother was a stay at home mom, but she went and started her career after I went off to school and built a very successful financial planning and corporate benefits company, which she's in the process of selling out. I think she's got another year or two in her buyout transition, and then she'll be retired. So, what a great place to go for, business advice and support in some cases. So,
Excellent.
yep.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. And for everyone listening, I know someone who is with the Women's President Organization in the DC area. I think she might be a professional facilitator, Betty Hines. I don't know if you know her, but they just love the organization. And it's for women who is it over, how much does your business have to, do you remember your business have to, revenue have to be?
Oh, I am so bad with numbers. I wish I'd looked this up, but
that's okay.
I
I'll make sure
it is, if it's a professional services company, I think it's 1.5 million. And if you sell widgets, it's like 3 million, to be in one particular chapter level. And then there's a platinum level that is like, the big companies, like 100 million plus.
Right.
So kind of, there's a threshold to get in. And then when you join up into a chapter or a group, you get paired up with women whose businesses are of similar sizes.
Okay, excellent. So for everyone listening, just so people would know that, but that said, still there are organizations and local associations and different things that we can join to get support during those whatever phase of the business that you're in. But just so we can mention that this one has a certain level as far as revenue for your business, but there are others out there. And I love what you said, Tiffany, even in the beginning, you decided, okay, let me just get some women together and let's just go into the mountains. So in other words, there are ways to find support.
Absolutely. Sometimes you've got to, roll your sleeves up and be the, champion to pull that together. And then sometimes you can affiliate with other organizations. And I do think with WPO, and don't quote me on this, I probably should know since I'm such a big fan of it, but I think you can still sign up and go to the conferences and, go onto the website. There's just great information and podcasts and those type things in there to look at that. So I think it's being in a particular chapter, there's certain requirements, but I think just going to some of their events, you do not need to be at a certain amount. And I know that from time to time, I've been to eWomen's Network events too, and that's a great one for women. And I know that there's no threshold on revenues for that one.
eWomen's Network. Okay. Yep. So for everyone, I'll make sure I look these up and have links just so we can start the research there, ways to get support. So what would you say, Tiffany, entrepreneurship has taught you about yourself as a woman?
I try not to separate the woman piece and look at it just as an entrepreneur, but I'm going to come back to also leveraging kind of the feminine qualities. What have I learned about entrepreneurship is I would say, never, ever give up, ever. If you've got a dream or a passion, just make it happen. Like my mom says, make it a great day, not have a great day, go make it a great day. And, I think so many entrepreneurs stop too soon or they never get out of the gate because they're afraid of failure. And I think that I have learned that I'm a risk taker and I'm not afraid of failure. And to me, a failure is sometimes the best learning experience that, it's easy to climb. It's hard to climb back up after you fall, but if you can learn how to do that, I think that really kind of shows what a great entrepreneur is. So don't be afraid to fail. Make the best of your situation. What can you learn from that? So that would say what I learned about being an entrepreneur. What I would say about being a woman is, I think don't be afraid to let kind of that femininity come into your business. For instance, we're a recruiter. That's really, at the end of the day, the core and the heartbeat of our company. We are good at what we do because we are really, really strong at recruitment. And recruiters, really, really good recruiters, have a lot of really feminine qualities. And men can do this too. So I'm not saying that they can't, but you're embracing kind of the femininity. We're nurturers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we get on the phone with our clients and we're trying to figure out what they're struggling with business-wise, what projects are they trying to accomplish, and how can they be successful when they have the right team around them, right? So part of what we're doing is nurturing the client, figuring out how to make them successful by bringing good team members to them. And then we go out and we try to find the right talent to fill those positions, right? And as we find them, we kind of coach and nurture and guide them through that process, help them get their resume together, help them prep for the interviews, help them debrief after the interviews, help them negotiate their contracts. And so, what I have always said to my recruiters is bring that feminine quality in. We're natural nurturers, and you can be really good at this recruiting if you're nurturing all the people around you, making your candidate successful, making your client successful. And when you make that match, that's a really good thing.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I love the way you separated that. And that's so true, that feminine energy, really.
Yes, I think that's a good way to put it. Mm-hmm.
So in closing, Tiffany, if you think over your life and career and you had the chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be and what would you say?
It's not fair making it just one person.
I know, it's hard. It's hard.
Obviously, a lot of hats off to Bill Augustine, who helped me launch this company and being a great mentor. Hats off there. But I think it really goes to you said to address this to her. Hey, Mom, as you always helped us believe that we could do anything. You taught us not to fear failure. Taught us to make the best of what we have, and you paved the way. You made the introduction to HealthLink, and you've always been here, and you've been my number one champion.
Beautiful. I know she's going to love that.
So I hope so. And of course, my dad too. But
sure
Mom has been a tremendous influence. Excellent. Mom has been a tremendous influence. Yes.
So now tell us, what are the ways that we can support you? Tell everyone the website, any social media or anything else. I'll make sure I have links to everything, but just so we can hear it.
Well, first of all, our website is intellectresources.com, so you can check out a little bit about what we do, and find me personally on LinkedIn. And one of the things that you can do for us is help us figure out how we can take this big break model into other industries or other market. It was incredibly successful at a time that the healthcare IT industry was in need. We had so much fun doing it. It delivered great results, and I would love to find a partner or someone that can help us take that into other industries and do it all again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for sharing your story with us. Your story and being candid just about the business side, but also the emotional side of entrepreneurship too.
Well, I love spending time with you. I love what you're doing with your podcast, and I hope that our paths are going to stay connected. Thank you.
Definitely. Now, before you go, what's a parting piece of advice from you to our listeners about anything?
Do what my mom said. Make it a great day every day. It's up to you.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Tiffany. To find out more about her and to find out more about Intellect Resources, make sure you go to supportissexy.com. Go to that search box and search Tiffany. Her show notes page will pop up with links, resources, and the ways to get in touch with her. Supportissexy.com and search Tiffany. Make sure it's Tiffany Crenshaw. Now, until we all chat again, always remember, support is sexy, and having it all doesn't mean doing it all alone. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care.